We have waited a long time for Stormgate to reach its pinnacle. Mostly negative recent reviews. It's been on the border for a long time on mixed, good or bad, thumbs up, thumbs down, equal, but now the tides have turned. And Bellular has a video about why Stormgate has failed, so let's find out more, shall we?
Their goal of making this one pains me, but the news is the news and I gotta report it, and I've got to start with a quote. The bottom line is, the release was undercooked. Now, those are the words of Stormgate CEO Tim Morten, and they're honestly kind of damning. You see, Stormgate peaked at 1,000 concurrent players after the full launch, but that was down from 3,000 during early access. And another thing that's down is user reviews. And they've never really been up because they've never made it far beyond 50% positive.
Exactly. 50% is where it sat for like the longest time, and now it's finally properly starting to dip into that negative.
It's quite brutal, and it's a sad state for one of gaming's most prominent ex-Blizzard teams. Like, this was supposed to be the new RTS from ex-Blizzard talent. So the people who knew how to make StarCraft, but were not being allowed to make more StarCraft. But now we've got the CEO painting a rather dire picture of how things went at his own company. One where the company is quite literally running out of steam. And here's his exact words, quote, "Stormgate has not been a commercial success, and though I'm extremely grateful for the players we have, companies run on capital."
Yeah, I don't think the 4 people that are playing right now can probably fund the game.
Now, to some, that statement will seem impossible because, hey, this company raised $40 million in funding. Rough truth is that $40 million will only get you so far, at least.
Especially since he's in California, right, isn't he? I think part of the big criticism is people were criticizing them opening up a big company, the salaries they gave themselves, and the environment, the area. Obviously, they live in America, so they want to live nearby, but we all know there's extortionate rates for where your location is, especially when you're creating movies or video games, whatever it might be. So California is insanely expensive, so
if your scope and your ambition is what theirs was. But who the hell are these people anyway? So here's the story. Frost Giant launched in 2020 with some serious pedigree. Tim Morten led production on StarCraft 2 Legacy of the Void. And I've got to say, that expansion was a banger. And speaking of bangers, Tim Campbell designed the Frozen Throne Warcraft 3 campaign. One of the all-time greats in gaming. So with pedigree...
Found in a Durotar, he's pretty responsible for that. He was working on that big time, which is great.
Agree like that, their goal of making a worthy successor to those games feels somewhat reasonable. They wanted to make a truly great RTS, and they decided to build that using their own custom tools called Snowplay. And the plan followed StarCraft 2's eventual business model. You see, StarCraft 2 found success going free to play with its multiplayer, with paid campaign episodes, and then co-op stuff going on top of that. And of course, here with Stormgate, they were going to do that with an ongoing live service with skin sales and new heroes. And over 3 years, they raised $35 million from private investors. Then came the Kickstarter. Not to finish the game, mind you. No, the campaign was meant to fund special editions and a pre-launch beta. That led to another $1.2 million in public funding before the launch. And everything really was teed up for success. I saw the hype amongst some creators, and then their Steam Next Fest demo kind of exploded. It was the second most played. So with all that, you'd think they would be teed up for a perfect early access launch. Of course, the reality is they were not. Those who thought the Next Fest success would translate to something huge were actually right. Early access was huge. It was a huge disaster. And one...
I remember the amount of hype. You even had Asmongold playing it. You might say even had, but Asmongold doesn't play RTS. So he'll check out some weird games though, I'll give you granted, but there's a lot of people that were getting into this game. They wanted to see it succeed and be the next big thing. Obviously that was the intention from Stormgate. They were like, you like Warcraft, you like StarCraft, here's Stormgate is the next big thing. You like those two things, this is the game that takes you into the future. You don't have to play anything else, this is the one. Yeah, didn't work out.
One review summed it up perfectly. Quote, "You can take the developer out of Blizzard, but you..."
Yes, Asmongold has played RTS like Warcraft 3 in the past. He does reference it, I'll give you granted, but I suspect it's probably been about 13 plus years at least since he's probably played RTS properly.
can't take the blizzard out of the developer. That must have stung for the team, but it didn't come out of nowhere. You see,
Probably
audiences
longer.
thought they'd pre-ordered everything at launch, but it turns out they hadn't, because there was a new $10 hero voiced by Simu Liu. That there was an extra purchase was a surprise, but then GameStar pointed out another problem. Frostgiant had actually messed up in Kickstarter and didn't even realize it. Their FAQ had promised people,
It wasn't
quote,
included, was it?
all Year Zero heroes. This was present on the expanded backer tiers, but someone on the team just deleted that line after Frostgiant had already promised a new paid hero for all backers.
Redacted. Just a cheeky little delete, and yeah, that contract doesn't exist anymore. What hero? You don't get any hero. That's not part of the deal.
So yes, that felt bad. Sentiment soured fast, and unfortunately, the game itself didn't help. People thought the art and design side of things was generic. I think they went stylized in a way that not all of their audience appreciated. Some design elements were found to be underwhelming, as was the writing. There was a short campaign with...
The writing was something else. And I haven't actually played the campaign properly since I last visited it, like over a year ago. So I might be overdue to giving it a go and then giving my thoughts, but yeah, the dialogue was definitely rough in a lot of those scenes. Very sort of weirdly millennial, I guess you might say, the sense of humor. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's cringy and sort of self-aware, which doesn't fit to create an immersive environment or tell the story they're trying to tell, because you're constantly taken out of it with their cheesy jokes and behavior that doesn't seem to fit. As for the gameplay, it's kind of trying to satisfy both the Warcraft audience and the StarCraft audience, and therefore probably doesn't really quite satisfy anyone properly, because we're all die hard about our own thing. I like Warcraft 3 more than I like StarCraft 2. I can play StarCraft 2, but I like Warcraft 3. I play Warcraft 3. If it doesn't play like Warcraft 3, why would I want to play it? And then StarCraft 2 people would feel the same, even StarCraft people. If it doesn't play like the game I want to play, this is too slow. It's too much like Warcraft 3, they say. But for me, when I look at it, I feel like the design and the sort of look of everything and the sound of everything is far more StarCraft orientated, which is fine, but it's not the Warcraft 3 I want, so no one's getting satisfied here.
No offline skirmish mode at launch. That again would have been rough. There was no mod support in day one, and plenty of quality of life issues. Obviously, it was early access. I wouldn't necessarily expect all of those things to be perfect, but it was just that the overall picture didn't feel like something cohesive. And that's the challenge of getting early access right. Yes, it's not the full game, but it still needs to feel like a cohesive thing, because people are actually paying money for it. So the early access launch didn't deliver success, but investor Bitcraft led a new funding round to push the team toward their full launch. And April 2025 brought a complete rework of the early access content. Unfortunately, the player numbers did not budge.
No.
Which again must have been crushingly depressing.
It is. I mean, what can you say? Imagine if you're developing this game, but there's only like 20 people playing it. It's so rough, man. You'd just be so demoralized from that. And they'd have to try to keep a chipper fort, because, you know, things can change. You can have a good bit of promo, PR, etc. And then, poof, a big bump. You go a little bit viral or whatever. And then you get the players in. But, oh, yeah, it's a bit foreboding.
If you were on that dev team. Of course, the sentiment did not raise up either, and the 1.0 launch that came in August 2025 did not turn things around either. So in short, the public life of this game is not great. And now, as players are debating whether or not the game is even dead, the CEO has been delivering a month-long postmortem. CEO Tim Morten published 5 blogs on LinkedIn. And
He's been fighting a lot.
The failure of Stormgate. In every single one, he blames himself for everything that happened. So let's go through these things chronologically. He started by discussing the state of the industry, quite simply saying that audiences demand higher quality than ever before, and it's not just the audiences, it's also investors when it comes to their expectations for the funding that they provide. Then he dove into the RTS genre problem. You see, Stormgate was built on things they learned from StarCraft. And here's what they knew. Campaign players were your biggest audience, but competitive players, well, they were the ones who drove the conversation. Meanwhile, co-op was essential for bringing in new players. The problem? You'd need to hit all 3 modes to truly succeed as an RTS in the modern market. And of course, even StarCraft 2 could not justify a sequel with its revenue, even after it had actually implemented those 3 pillars. Now, Tim Morten says that now he understands that splitting focus was in fact a mistake. They thought they needed to have all of those things to basically make the flywheel work, to get the network effects on their side. But obviously the result is that, quote, every single mode fell short of player expectations. That's obviously quite bad. What about the aesthetic problems, though? Well, he basically blames trying to please everyone. There's a little bit of a catch with that. He cites analyst revenue figures for recent successful RTS games, and the third post took aim at a Windows Central article. Now, basically, that article looked at Steam user reviews showing disappointment across early access, and it suggested that Morten somewhat ignored that players didn't like Stormgate. And he kind of objects pretty strongly here. He agrees that the release was undercooked and that it was his fault. He says he didn't give his team enough time, and he points to StarCraft's 7-year development before Wings of Liberty, or other games like Expedition 33 or Silksong. I mean, like we said in our Silksong video, imagine never having to worry about funding and just the job being to ship the game whenever it's right. That's where the StarCraft team had been. But of course, Tim Morten's job was to worry about the funding, because he wasn't Blizzard Entertainment anymore. He didn't have Warcraft money. And the financial side is where the Kickstarter bit them again. Quote, Stormgate is fully funded to release.
I feel like they had quite a lot of time working on this game, right? There's obviously the premise and the concept that goes before they're even properly working on the engine, and then you've got like the 1 to 2 years at least of them doing sort of Gamescom events and such, where they're on stage talking about the game and promoting it. Like, there was a long time of working upon this, so I feel like you can't have that as too much of an excuse. Sure, StarCraft had like the 7 years and stuff like that, but I don't quite buy that part of the argument. I feel like they should be prepared going into this, right? You should be more prepared. Otherwise, this is on you, isn't it, really? If I want to sort of like, I don't know, make my own store where I sell cookies, right? I should be thinking about how I'm going to make that store run, the operational costs, staffing, how am I going to get the food, who's my suppliers? If one of my suppliers goes down, am I going to have a backup supplier with which I can get the ingredients to continue creating the product that is useful for my customers to eat? Like, you should be thinking about this before it's even been created. Like, it just, the way he comes across is just like, yeah, we just turned up in a studio one day and just started working on it the last year or two, and now here it is. We were forced to put it out. The reason why they put it out is because they were losing so much interest so quickly after the early access. Is they were basically like, they weren't ready to properly like officially release the game. They wanted to take a long time. They wanted to do like 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4 before getting to 1.0, which would be the release. But they kind of had to push it. And yeah, they were hoping it would give it the bump. But obviously, yeah, it middled, didn't it? It didn't really do anything.
That was the campaign promise. According to Morten, Frost Giant meant the game becoming available in early access. By that, not the actual full game. You see, early access is when the monetization would start, and therefore would start keeping the game alive, hence $10 heroes at launch. Now obviously, players expected release to mean version 1.0. He also touched on the changed FAQ, saying that a team member's, quote, inexperience led to them to just delete that line. Obviously, players got angry, that created an adversarial relationship with fans, and some then started to forensically analyze Frost Giant for proof of wrongdoing or any trouble, which of course is going to generate more stories that aren't necessarily good ones for the company. And of course now Stormgate is in trouble. Morten was already talking about layoffs to Bloomberg immediately after launch. Following that and these blogs, someone then asked him a fairly direct question. And the question is this: is there a team working on the game? And here's his response, quote, some work continues, but the only real path forward is through partnership. Stormgate has not been a commercial success, and though I'm extremely grateful for the players we have, companies run on capital. So yeah, he's going to need a big old injection.
Anyone out there got a bit of spare cash to kickstart Stormgate once again? Like, what happened to all those people that were working on it? They're just out of a job now or something? Because the studio doesn't have enough money to fund another project, as far as I know, that they can work on and sell that, right? So they're just they just don't turn up to work anymore or whatever. Like who's actually who's turning out to the studio and turning the lights on and actually making sure the servers are running? I always wonder that kind of stuff because the servers have to run, right? The game is out, so unless they shut the game down completely, which it isn't, as far as I know, you can still play it. Someone's operationally funding the game one way or another.
Of money. Now, in the minds of some players, well, this is a confusing situation, and for a fairly simple reason. $40 million. How do you fail when you have $40 million? Okay, first thing to understand.
Too big.
Frostgiant rode the COVID investment wave where, like with many other veteran developers, they just got showered with cash early on. By that I mean 4.7 million in 2020, another 5 million in 2021.
See, look, going all the way back to 2020, right? This is a lot more than the 2 years or whatever. So what's this sort of like they've barely had any time to work on the game? It's not true.
And then 25 million in 2022. Now, all that funding was built on a bet. That bet being that the industry thought, it would pay off, right? That's why money was being heaped in. Frostgiant was valued at potentially being worth $150 million when Stormgate released. Again, I wonder what the definition of release is, because if they meant early access, then it certainly ain't worth $150 million. But here's the problem. The industry Stormgate was pitched in, well, it's not the industry Stormgate was released in. And that's not just some trite remark. You see, if investment had have continued at that scale, then Stormgate would have actually had a AAA budget, would have been humongous. And that was actually the game that they started building. But here's the thing with early stage company funding, right? If you want to get a lot more money in, you do need to have quite a big, bold vision that you will credibly pull off. This team obviously had loads of things that would suggest they were credibly the people to do this job. But obviously, investment trends really did change. And I suppose they could have been left with this humongously scoped, very expensive game, but not really the revenue runway to pull it off. I mean, just for a second, think about this. Their plan was a game truly of Blizzard's scale, right? Campaign, co-op, map editor, multiplayer, like loads of community tournament features, and all of that at a high level of graphical fidelity. Because of course, this was meant to be a new modern game in the StarCraft style. Not just that, it was meant to be basically the spiritual successor. That's a hell of a lot of work. That's the type of lofty ambition that can get you a lot of funding. And in the early days, that worked. They were building to a big scale. I mean, just look at the credits. There are 120 plus names who are in direct development roles on this game. Plus, of course, the supporting structures like publishing teams, voice actors, and composers. And that's along with the outsourcing companies covering art, cinematics, and localization. That's a lot. And let's just do some rough maths here. Take an average California game dev wage of, say, 100 grand. It's a lot of money. I'll say that maybe a third are contractors and they're ultimately costing the company less than the employees or something. But the studio still, covers rent, utilities, and everything else. You could ballpark their annual burn rate at about $10 million. So that would be the cost to run a year of Frostgiant at full pace. Now, again, that's based on loose napkin maths, but it should give you an idea of the scales we're talking about. And that also doesn't factor in marketing costs or anything else. But consider this. Their largest fundraising was $25 million in 2020. Now, when you think about the costs of these things, I mean, your $1.2 million Kickstarter. Assume that Kickstarter doesn't take 10%. Assume you don't have rewards to fulfill, probably taking up another 35%. That's just going to be doing a few people for a year, because making games, especially in that region, is expensive. And during a lot of this development...
So I was saying, because it's done in California, it's in that environment as well. So they obviously led it to be successful with that intention of it being successful. But if you can't pull it off, it's going to fall apart quite quickly. What would you guys have done differently for Stormgate? What would your plan be? Do you think they should have just gone all in on the StarCraft audience and not really done the Warcraft? Because I think from a business perspective, that would have been better for them. If they just made the game... I think there's a lot more people clamoring for a StarCraft RTS than there is a Warcraft RTS. Even though I like Warcraft RTS and I would prefer that myself, I think generally there would be more people. So by bending themselves both ways, they weren't able to satisfy the StarCraft audience. They just needed to not copy and paste StarCraft 2 per se, but let's face it, people don't like the game to be too different because then it's so alien that they don't want to play it. So it needs to have a lot of semblances that play like StarCraft 2, the fast pacing, the aggression, the multiple expansion points of defense. So creating those epic moments that people can watch and enjoy, because StarCraft 2 had a lot of tournaments, a lot of people watched that. So they had some sort of flow from the beginning of the game to the end of the game that kept people hooked. They needed that, I think. I think the creep camps and stuff like that, whilst it satisfies the Warcraft audience, it didn't particularly satisfy the overall general RTS audience.
It truly was expensive. It's a little bit of an anecdote, but I've heard
Dave would say, I think they should have brought a more appealing story with sensible game. Yes. Well, without going down that path too deeply, I feel like the game felt a little woke, right? In terms of the design, a little bit wishy-washy, and the characters felt a little not very gritty, not very grounded. Like, you think of the StarCraft universe, Reyna, Tychus, Kerrigan, they're badass. The characters in this one were sort of giggly and silly. They didn't feel very real or people that I really wanted to get behind. So that's my opinion in regards to the story and the dialogue. I felt like that was lacking. I wasn't like getting behind these badass characters. Oh, how is this character going to play in the game? I can't wait to play them, RP as this character or whatever.
A few little stories of just some people I know over there who back then would be talking about, like, say, losing a candidate whenever they're trying to hire people to offers that were like north of 300K. And certainly, and I don't want to say what role it was because I don't want it to be identifying, but let's just say it wasn't a programming role. And I mean, that just gives you a sense of how expensive that old bubble really got. But hey, to make the best games, you need the best talent, you need to be in the best place. California is that place, and that's the way that things are done.
See, the other thing is I'm pretty sure they didn't have much of a marketing team. So they had all these other funds going into development of the game, which rightfully should be the case. But perhaps they should have spent some of that crazy money they were already spending on a little bit more marketing, PR, to expose the game even more. Obviously, they kind of knew that they had people behind it because of people expecting something. Anyone that's played a Blizzard game would probably have been somewhat aware of Stormgate. Not anyone, but, a lot of people, particularly the RTS, they were somewhat aware of Stormgate just by being associated or knowing what Blizzard were and what the RTS games were, because they kind of took that mantle. But they didn't, as far as I know, a lot of the time they really didn't have people promoting them. I'm a bit lazy with that kind of stuff. I don't do any marketing or whatever promotion for myself, but I probably should, though. And as a big video game company themselves, they absolutely should have done.
And the way that early stage company funding is done is, you get money. That gives you a runway. You make progress. And then you move from, your Series A to your Series B and your Series C. And you do pull in more and more and more money. Now, Frost Giant will say an AI research lab, they'd be doing great right now. Problem is, they're a games company, and that's not really where the money's been going to these days. So the budget that Frost Giant started with was pretty big. And what that did is it ended up being pretty much all that they would end up getting. So no wonder Morten is saying that if they made the game now, they'd have to outsource to outside of America. They'd maybe have to use more generative AI. Basically, they would have had to have done loads of things differently. So they were left in a situation where they were unable to do further large-scale funding raises, and that just meant they had to do a launch with what they had, because cutting features that you've publicly announced doesn't exactly make you look like a company that's valued at $150 million. And at both early access and full launch, well, what happened is you ended up with a Stormgate that did not have enough time in the oven. It was undercooked. The CEO even says that himself. It was a game split across half a dozen different development areas, all because they were trying to hit a target that was set when the games industry was entirely different and where their expectation of future funding was not in line with the timeline that we've ended up in. So where are we left? Well, Tim is not mincing words about the state of the game anymore. He says every single mode fell short of player expectations. That's a massive thing to say, but it's true. I do appreciate honesty. Now, it doesn't change anything for Stormgate as it currently stands. There are remaining developers still working in the game, and they've teased a new update as recently as last week. But here's the truth. Stormgate's problems didn't start at launch. They did not start at early access. It wasn't Simu Liu's fault. You know, he didn't come in and kill the game. No. It wasn't the Kickstarter either.
You say that, but you've always got to be careful about who you use to promote your product, because I know that Simu Liu has upset quite a lot of original gamers with some of his political takes that he might put on Twitter. I'm not going to bring those out to you, but you can do your own research. So when you have certain people promoting your game and then they see, oh, this person's involved, that can have a knock-on effect. It certainly can do. So it's very important who you get on board. You don't want people that alienate through their own political phases. Like, there's too many celebrities, dare I say, on Twitter that open their mouth just a bit too much when perhaps they should just keep it shut for the good of the company, themselves, and everyone else involved, because they're just going to piss people off. Not to say you can't have those political opinions, but perhaps you should maybe create another account for those specific opinions rather than using those as your general brand, because you are associated with that brand. Now that brand is associated with Stormgate, and then people look at that and they go, yeah, it reinforces their idea that the game was woke or whatever. Do you know what I mean?
Stormgate's problem started whenever they tried to reach an incredibly difficult goal, a strategy game that would surpass StarCraft 2 on all levels. And they did so expecting the industry would rise up to support them.
Gotta love those StarCraft cinematics.
Because you know what? They'd done it before. They made StarCraft 2. But like so many developers in recent years, it didn't pan out. Things changed around them. They didn't end up with the resources and the time they thought they would have, and that meant that some of their public statements ended up not ringing true. And that meant that players are now dealing.
They should have projected more for that, though.
Been undercooked. As for the people,
especially
left
with
the
the huge funding they got in the beginning, that's more than they were expecting. I'm pretty sure.
They will try to do updates. They'll probably try to do what they can. Maybe it's because they haven't worked out their new strategy yet. Maybe it's because they think if they can hold on, that maybe they will find the investor that they need, someone to come in and rescue them from this situation.
So their plan is just to constantly keep getting bailed out. That's not a good plan.
So the game can finally end up being cooked. Obviously, that is a slim chance. And as far as the ex-Blizzard studios go, this is undoubtedly the one that's had the most issues. I mean, maybe there have been more issues at Bonfire, because I think they've basically been a bonfire for cash for many years. They have finally unveiled something that does actually look pretty neat. There's obviously the other raft of Blizzard Studios, the Dreamhaven raft, and if you want to find out what's going on there, you should watch this video next, because the two games that have came out from under them, really good, but unfortunately, they're now having to lay off staff.
Yeah, I heard a little bit about that. That was a good video there from Bellular. Lovely. I like the insightful commentary. What can you say about Stormgate? And you say, why didn't I tell them? I mean, I kind of did, to be honest. Like, let's see if I can find my video. Witty Stormgate. It might be here. Here you go. That's a year ago. Why is Stormgate bad? Like, you say, why didn't I tell them that it was bad? Why didn't you tell them not to be bad, to not be bad? Why is Stormgate bad? Stormgate review. Right? It's literally right there. That's a 38-minute video that goes into a lot of detail about criticizing what is the Stormgate, the overview of the features, criticisms, user interface, how that scuffed the story, heroes and units, Snowplay engine, the audio, and then obviously the mechanics of the gameplay itself, 1v1, co-op, etc. So if you want to check that video out, feel free to do so. That's right there for you.